Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joshablon, and welcome back to our series on humans. Now, today we are going to be covering a topic that is kind of difficult in some ways, and it's just going to kind of be talking about just some chest muscles. And so, for this, we're going to be working off of a Da Vinci piece, or more a Da Vinci sketch. And so, yeah, we're going to draw that out and kind of analyze it to kind of show where chest muscles are. And this is more going to be focused on kind of male anatomy. It does work with females too and everything, but if you slim the figure down and add the natural place or stores of body fat in the appropriate places, then it all works out. So it works both ways. So just starting out, just going to quickly draw. This is kind of where the neck's going to be, and then kind of the chin that comes down. And then we're going to kind of have the back of the neck coming down over here, and then coming out on the back muscles. Just going to quickly draw a brief outline of where the back muscles are going to be. They're quite important, but we aren't going to be covering them kind of today. Maybe in another video. Yeah, I'm not sure if this Da Vinci piece actually has a name, or the Da Vinci sketch rather. I'm not really sure if it has a specific name, but I drew it out just kind of because it really helps with understanding kind of the muscular anatomy. That's important for drawing a figure, especially the male figure for the specific one. Okay, so there we go. We kind of have our back outline, and now we're going to kind of start on kind of the chest area. So we have our kind of SCM muscles that we talked about in our video on kind of drawing necks, and yeah, have our clavicle coming across, and then it kind of drops down to where the pectoral muscle is going to be. So, need to make that dip just a little bit longer. Kind of comes out like this. Now it's going to be really dramatic on this piece because I'm, again, going to just kind of be copying from the Da Vinci sketch, adding my own little things here and there. It does come down, but in this piece it's very dramatic, but in general it's not going to be as dramatic. Maybe it was more dramatic back in his day, but in our day and age it's probably just going to be a little bit more like that. A lot less dramatic than he had it. Have it just come up for the collarbone, come down here. And it's really good to be kind of looking for key places where various particular back muscles will meet up with front muscles. And I'm just going to go and fix one part of the back muscles because I messed up with the sizing of it. We'll take that out. And we'll kind of make this part as big as it should be. So yeah, kind of around there, that's about the size of it. And then this back muscle comes up like that. And the pectoral muscle, it comes down almost to the bottom of that. So I'm going to make the bottom of it around there. And so this will curve under like that. And so the pectoral muscles are going to be at different stages of definition depending on how muscular your figure is or how much fat is on your figure. So that's an important thing to note. And yeah, just basically, I'm just going to quickly draw where the arm is supposed to be, because that might just give us a nice little reference point as to where all of this is going to be. I'm just going to have it be kind of a cut-off arm. That's how it is in the original piece as well. And it'll come over like this, where your deltoids are. So just kind of fancy word for your shoulder muscles. It's what your shoulder muscles are actually called, as your deltoids. So there we go. There's kind of your shoulder and where your shoulder is going to be. We're not going to be focusing on arm muscles today. We're going to be focusing on that in a different video. So yeah, so that's basically where your arm is going to be in all of this. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go back and fix this top. I made it a little bit too small. The shoulder muscles are actually quite big, so, and they do kind of arch down in the middle. They kind of have a front section and back section, so that is also quite important. They probably won't be making the same shape that I'm making. I'm just doing that because that's what's in the original. But yeah, just kind of showing the point that there are front and back muscles in your shoulder. So yeah, that's why I'm doing that there. So moving on, we're going to be focusing more on the abdominals now. So the abdominals, they don't come out as far as your pectorals like that. They're just going to be coming out kind of just here-ish. So a little over halfway. And they'll kind of come down like that. We're just going to have kind of 6 main abdominals, and then kind of a little bulge going down towards the groin area. So the biggest of your kind of 3 rows of abdominals in the front, the second one's going to be the biggest one. So it'll kind of come down a little bit less of a steep curve and all that. And there we go. There's kind of our second abdominal, and then we'll have our third abdominal, which is kind of just not a super big curve as well. And then it's going to kind of jump down into our little bulge going down into the groin area. Yeah, and so there we go. That's kind of how it's gonna work. And here it is actually going to bulge just a tiny little bit more outwards. So we'll kind of have that coming out, our kind of third abdominal row of abdominals there. Kind of just erase a tiny bit here. You don't want any of them to look way too different from the other ones. And yeah, so that's kind of where your abdominals are going to be. Now, again, this may be different depending on what figure you're drawing, or if you're just drawing the same picture as I'm drawing from. So yeah, it may be different depending on who you're drawing, what pose they're in, and just how their physical anatomy is. It may also depend on ethnicity. I'm not aware of any changes throughout ethnicity and specific biological changes of this nature. So yeah, I'm not aware of stuff like that. So sorry if, yeah. Oh, crap. Accidentally got this bulge with the third abdominal. Shouldn't have done that. There we go. So, moving on. So there's kind of where our abdominals are. Now, what we can do one of 2 things right now. We can either go through and kind of shade where our specific abs and whatnot are going to be, or we can just kind of draw them out and circle kind of where they are. I'm going to do both of those, actually. We're just going to quickly draw out kind of in circular patterns where specifically they are. So we have kind of our abdominal here. That's kind of the shape that it takes. Then we have our abdominal here. It kind of takes the same shape, but quite a bit bigger. Then we have our third one. It's just a little bit more rectangular, plain and simple. And now this is where it gets a little bit interesting. If you ever kind of look at cartoons or anime or anything like that, and there's a shirtless figure, typically what they'll do, if they're really muscular, is they'll add a whole bunch of muscles kind of here on the side. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on right now. So there are going to be kind of 2 rows of muscles that come down here. They're kind of going to be following diagonal patterns. The first row that we're going to be drawing, it kind of has 4 main muscles, and the one coming along the other side kind of has 6. So we're going to have a muscle around here for this row, going to have another muscle. It'll be a little bit bigger coming down. It'll come down just about halfway through the second abdominal. We'll have our third one coming down, and it'll kind of meet with the bottom of our second abdominal. And then our last one, it'll be a little bit smaller, a little bit more pointed on one end, and it kind of is in the middle of this very last abdominal down here. And so that's kind of going to be our first line of muscles. Moving forward, we're going to have our second line of muscles. So we'll have our first one there, second one is going to be kind of here. It's going to be kind of pointing towards the middle of these two muscles in the row in front of it. So they kind of are going to be alternating from here on out for the most part. Draw another one, it'll kind of come in a little bit. We'll have another one. This one's going to be a little bit less pointed, just kind of blunt. So that's going to be there. We're going to have kind of just a really small muscle over here. And then for the last muscle, it's going to come up kind of here. It's rather big in its own way, just because it's quite long. And there we go. So that's going to kind of be your couple rows of muscle around there. And we are going to go back in and kind of shade around these areas. I'm just drawing them in circles right now so that we can understand exactly where they are. So there we go. We're going to be drawing kind of another little section of muscle. It doesn't take too long. Kind of curves down here. There's this big chunk here. And then it kind of comes down to the groin area. So there we go. We could go forward and just complete the drawing, and by doing that I mean just draw in all the back muscle. I'm just going to quickly do that to make this drawing seem just a little bit more complete, but we are not going to be covering specifics about these muscles. So yeah, I'm also just going to adjust the placement of these because they should be a little bit more to the right. And there we go. So we have that. We have our little bit of back muscle here. We're going to be having just a little bit of musculature coming off of here. And yeah. So there we go. There's kind of a little map of where all the muscles are going to be in this specific area that we're covering. So now we're going to be dealing a little bit more with kind of the shading of it, just to make it look a little bit more natural. So we're going to take all of our kind of circled areas and kind of dim them down a little bit so that we can faintly see them, but not fully. And I'm just going to be quickly using the hatching method, just because that is also what was originally used on this piece, or the sketch rather. I'm still not quite sure whether to call kind of sketches works of art or not. So we kind of have where the pectoral is, so that'll be shaded a little bit. I'll add just a couple of lines here, just kind of show a little bit of a curve in it. Maybe a couple of lines because that's where the shoulder is going to be. Coming down here, we'll have a little bit of shading kind of here in this area, a little bit of shading here underneath the pectoral muscle. And all the way along the bottom, there will be a little bit of shading, as the pectoral muscle will bulge a bit. Now these side muscles coming down here, they're really not going to be seen all too much unless the character is lifting their arm. Say they're swinging a sword or something. So just keep that in mind. We'll maybe have a tiny bit of shading in there. A little bit of shading on the underside is always good, depending on where your light source is coming from. Just keep in mind where your light source is coming from, because if it's coming from the bottom, it is probably going to be the opposite. Add a little bit of shading here. And now, as you can see, if we zoom out, we're kind of getting the idea of where the shading is going to be. this figure. Just going to add a tiny little bit in here, just to make it the two places, kind of the underside and just the spot right under, just to look a little bit clearer. Okay, now moving on to these kind of side muscles. Again, you kind of just want to very briefly get these ones. They're not going to be your main muscles like your abdominals and your pectorals, so just I would just recommend just doing a quick little thing kind of underneath them, just to kind of show where they are. You can make them a lot more defined if you so choose. I wouldn't recommend it all the time. Like sometimes there are, like, sometimes it's going to be beneficial to do that, but most of the time it's not going to be. If your character is that muscular and they're doing a pose where all of these muscles here are going to be showing, then maybe it would be a little bit beneficial to show maybe a fit of strength or something of the sort. And so yeah. And so there we go. There's kind of where all of our muscles are going to be. So you can go through, just do a little bit of shading kind of in between. That can just add a little bit of contrast of where the shadow is and where it isn't. So like before we add it all, we can, and we get rid of kind of the circles, you can kind of tell where all the shadow is going to be for this specific image. It is, I might recommend going through and doing all the little in-betweens, because that way it kind of tells you where the tops of it are going to be as well. And I would just recommend that for kind of cross-hatching. Or, sorry, not cross-hatching, just hatching. So we'll just go through, quickly grab all those little in-between spots. And that should make them stand out a little bit. Yeah. So standing out's not always something you want. And again, this is going to be with a very muscular figure. So if you are dealing with a muscular man or woman, you might want to add this. But generally, if it's not too muscular a person, there may be definition in this area because of ribs, depending on how slim the figure is. But for the most part, it's just sometimes going to be these muscles. A little bit of shading here, underneath where kind of this arm is. And so there we go, there's kind of an outline of where all of our muscles are going to be in that area. So if you may want to kind of slim down the shading just a little bit so that you can kind of briefly tell where some are. Like you may not want to see the entirety of those muscles. You may just want kind of a tiny highlight kind of showing where those muscles are and just showing that your character has them. You may not be wanting to show that they're super big and muscly. So I'm just going to go in with a second layer just to kind of show where my core muscles are. And by core muscles, I do kind of just mean the main muscles. So doing a little bit of pectoral. I'm going to kind of do the tiny little bit of shading on the abdominal muscles, just because they're rather important muscles. Not that the other ones aren't, just when it comes to drawing and whatnot, abdominals are very important. A little bit of shading underneath this arm again. And there we go. So yeah, that is basically how you're going to be doing chest muscles. Now, there are going to be other ways to do chest muscles. You don't have to be doing cross-hatching. I'm just doing that because that's the style of which my reference was using for shading. If you're going to be doing it from a frontwards angle, I would suggest kind of just thinking of this entire picture as being copied on from the other side. So if you go all the way to the like other side of the body, it'll be identical. And so just imagine that when you're drawing kind of from the front. You're going to kind of imagine what's coming down right in front. You're going to kind of have your head here, neck coming down with your trapezius muscles. Oh, that shoulder did not work. You're going to have your shoulder with your deltoids, which will bulge a little bit. And then you're probably going to have just coming down the center, you're going to have kind of pectoral muscles. You can just imagine where it's going to go from here. So like you'll have your pectoral muscles. You also don't want them to be too big or anything, because sometimes you just assume with the bigger the muscle is, the bigger you draw it on the person. Sometimes it's not true, because if I was drawing an arm here, I draw pectoral coming all the way up to there. It really doesn't work. If you make them too round, they probably won't look too much like muscles, but you also don't want them to be big and blocky, because that also won't work. So that's kind of the key with drawing muscle. You want to make sure that it's not too round, depending on where it is. If it's something like a bicep, of course you'd want it to be rather round. You just want it to kind of look strong. So there we go. I'm not going to focus on like where to draw like nipples and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to deal with that. That's an entirely different subject than from muscles, so we're not going to be dealing with that. And then you can kind of imagine where your abdominals are going to be. You'll have a couple here, and your bigger ones are going to be here. And down to your next ones. Next set of abdominals, kind of around here. And then moving on, you'll have kind of groin area down there, musculature going down towards that area, etc. You'll have kind of your muscles on the side, which you may or may not see from this angle. It just depends on how you're drawing your figure. And yeah, so this was just done as just a tiny side note, so it's not going to be perfectly accurate. I just wanted to kind of show where your muscles are going to be specifically when you're kind of dealing with the chest and where the chest muscles are. And yeah, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial on kind of where your chest muscles are and how you're going to be drawing them. If you want to use this shading method, or go and find the Da Vinci sketch to maybe just kind of draw it out for yourself, I would highly recommend that, as copying great masters is always going to help you hone your skills. So yeah. So thank you everybody so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.